I'd like to call this June 25th, 2020 school board meeting to order. Mr. Anagnostou, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Mrs. Buckner-Sallee?
Here.
Mr. Micko?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
And Mrs. Housum?
Here.
All present.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on our agenda is our district goals. We remind ourselves of our goals at every meeting. Our district goals are student achievement and growth, financial prudence, and public engagement. And every decision we make, we always measure by those three principles, and we do our best to keep them in balance. Next, we have public comment. I don't see any, Mr. Anagnostou, do you? We had some salient public comment earlier in the evening, but I don't see any at this point. So I will turn it over. The next section is recognition, and we're going to audible and go a little bit out of order, but Mrs. Sallee is here and her family is here, so we are going to reaffirm her oath of office and congratulate her. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Anagnostou.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. Mrs. Sallee, congratulations again. If you want to meet me at the podium, and we'll reaffirm the oath of office.
Okay, thank you.
Raise your right hand. Do you?
Sherry Buckner-Sallee.
Do solemnly reaffirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge my duties as a member of the Strongsville Board of Education to the best of my ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during my continuance in said office and until my successor is chosen and qualified. If so, say I do.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I want to say a few words. First, I would like to thank my family, Brian, Sydney, and Shelby, for always encouraging me, inspiring me, and challenging me, even challenging me sometimes to be my best self. I also like to thank my extended family and friends for being a positive influence in my life. And finally, I want to thank the board for appointing me to this position. As a parent and member of the Strongsville community, I have a vested interest in the success of the schools, and I understand the need to provide a quality education for our children. As a CPA and a business owner, I am able to help keep the goals of Strongsville, financial prudence of the system in mind. And as a teacher, I understand the needs of students in the classroom. I believe my professional and personal experiences make me qualified to be a productive member of the board, and I am honored to be appointed and excited to start my work. Thank you.
Once again, thanks Sherry for throwing her hat in the ring and giving us a great board member to round out the five of us. And I'm looking forward to everything that you bring. Just in the short time you've been here, you've done your homework. I was surprised you got the board book and finished it much quicker than I ever read it. So I know you find I know that we have serious work to do, and you're going to roll up your sleeves and do it well. And I want to congratulate your husband and your daughters. You are teaching by example, and I don't know any better way for those kinds of lessons to be taught. So congratulations again.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm now going to turn it over to Mrs. Pelko for recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. The first recognition that we have this evening is from our PTA Council presentation of volunteer hours. So if Mrs. Kelly Preseren would approach the podium.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Micko, members of the school board, Dr. Ryba, and Mrs. Pelko. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I have the privilege of serving as the vice president of the Strongsville Council PTA this year. I am here tonight on behalf of Council PTA and the 9 units that serve the children, parents, and schools of Strongsville. During this past year, PTAs in Strongsville have provided many enrichment activities for our children. These included book fairs, carnivals, preschool prom, family bingo nights, student group enrichment grants, holiday shops, family math and science nights, plus many more. We have worked with staff members and community leaders through kindergarten screening, the DARE program, Strongsville Food Bank, and Adopt a Family holiday program. While the last half of the year wasn't what anyone expected, our PTA units continue to work diligently to ensure our programs continued in all ways possible to provide teachers and students with the support that they needed, providing gift card grants, 5th grade graduation t-shirts and signs, senior graduation banners, and more. Collectively, between council and the 9 units, we approved around $20,000 in grants that include classroom and building materials and resources. Last month, Strongsville PTAs gave out 16 scholarships, totaling $8,000 to our graduating seniors. At the council level, we hosted Rockin' at the Rec dances for our middle schoolers. In February, we celebrated our annual Founders Day ceremony by recognizing 10 individuals that go above and beyond for the betterment of our students and school district. This year, I am happy to present the board with a certificate that represents 9,111 hours of volunteer service given by our PTAs for the benefit of children, staff, and schools of Strongsville. While this is lower than last year due to COVID-19, restrictions and events cancellations, our commitment continues to be strong, and we will continue to serve the district in the most effective ways we are able to in this challenging time. Thank you to the board and school administrators for giving us the opportunity to work with you to make positive contributions to our children's educational experiences. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Kelly, I just want to repeat that. 20,000 in grants, 16 scholarships to our seniors, 9,111 hours. I don't need to compare to last year. That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So for our retirement recognitions, I'm going to head to the podium. So I know this isn't our traditional retirement ceremony that we typically have, where we have more of a celebration and food and more families and more retirees attending. But it's nonetheless equally as special, and I am thrilled to have some of our retirees here in the audience and their families with us. I thank you for coming. I know it's a little later than expected and the year's over, and they're probably already enjoying their summer, but I really appreciate you seeing you again and being here, and so there's a few that I'd like to recognize this evening. So first, I'd like to recognize Mrs. Sharon Baker, who is here. And Sharon, if you feel comfortable and like to come stand over here to be recognized. So Sharon Baker has had an extremely unique and varied tenure within the Strongsville City School District. She started out at Albion Junior High, as it was called at the time, in 1981, teaching English and German. And then she took some time off, if I read all this correctly, took some time off and came back in 2004 to teach German at Albion Middle School then. And also through the years, I know you've taught Language Arts 2, more German, Introduction to German, and also taught at Center Middle School to teach Skills for Success. And then finally going to Strongsville Middle School, where she currently teaches 7th grade ELA. And so with all of her different buildings, her different roles and classrooms, it's just allowed Sharon to be one of the most flexible staff members in the building, according to her principal, Mr. Marino. Whatever you needed done, you could count on Sharon to step up and help. She's a key member of a variety of different committees and teams, including your 7th grade language arts team. Her compassion and empathy for her students showed every day, and her students gravitated toward that compassion. You would often observe students talking to Sharon about their middle school problems, and Sharon would always listen patiently. And while some staff sometimes get worn down by a lot of middle school problems, Sharon never seemed that way. She was always approachable and helpful, and just did a phenomenal job for us throughout the years. And finally, I think it's important to note that Sharon also served the district as a board member from 1994 through 2003. So congratulations on your 27 years, I believe, total with the district, and we wish you all the best in your retirement.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I have to say that Sharon was actually on the board when I got my first job here in Strongsville many, many years ago. So that was a fond memory.
I was going to mention that. A little piece of trivia, since we're in Zellers. When one of my first jobs when I was a student in high school, and it was for the city of Strongsville as a playground recreation supervisor, and this was one of the buildings in this room that I used to supervise kids for the summer. So
Full circle.
Full circle, exactly. I'm right back where I started. Thank you very much.
Congratulations to you. Next, I'd like to invite Jody Thome up to the area, I guess. So Jody began in Strongsville as a substitute in 2002. She was hired to teach grade 1, then finally at Sarar in 2008. And her principal, Dr. Razzo, shares this. Jody was always one of the first to arrive and one of the last to leave. She was very dedicated to her students and wanted to do the best that she possibly could. Even though this was her final year, you would have never guessed it. You never lost steam. She also wanted to share this story about you. And this kind of reflects, I think, who Jody is. So Jody purchased an orange purse. She thought it was a great-looking handbag. It was bright, compact, rectangular, a great place to keep all of her stuff organized. When she got home, she started to transfer from the old purse to the new purse. And who wouldn't, like us women do sometimes, we're excited we have a new bag, and so she was very excited about it. And as she took the tag off, she looked down and realized that it was not a purse, rather a wine bag. So they were laughing about this orange purse all year long.
Corkscrew and all.
Oh, really? I didn't have that part. So that's Jody, always bringing a smile and a laugh, even on the hardest of days. So here's to Jody. Enjoy time with your husband, Denny, and your children. And don't forget to bring that orange purse back on special occasions.
It's always.
Not on school property, though.
Always.
Okay, not on school property. Congratulations, Jody. Next, I'd like to recognize Patty Stakes. So Patty has been teaching here in Strongsville in some form or fashion for 41 years. Yes, let's give that a round of applause. She began in special education and since then has taught third grade at both Drake and then at Whitney since 1997. And I have to say, this year I visited Patty's classroom. She invited me to come and visit. And you would have never thought that she's been here for 41 years. She had, I'll call it a co-teacher, one of our intervention specialists in the room. And she was embedding social emotional learning in her class, trying something new with her students to try to teach them how to persevere, how to be resilient with math. And so they completed this entire lesson on what it meant for them to learn a new skill and how they persevered. So there were kids drawing pictures of gymnastics and and of learning how to play basketball, anything that was meaningful to them. And so she said, how do you do that? What do you have to do? I have to practice. I have to keep trying. I have to try again. And she said, that's exactly what we do in math. So it's one of our goals as a district to try to teach these skills in our kids, and she's just never stopped to try to embrace new ways of doing things to reach students. And, I'll also say there was a new student in the classroom who had her head down with tears and just transferred into Strongsville, I think, a few days prior to that, right? She's down on her knees trying to talk to the student, trying to embrace her, trying to bring her along and make her feel like a valued member of the class. And I mean, just again, such a role model for your peers, and I was so excited to be able to witness that. A few more things about Patty, from your principal, Mr. Stacco. He says, all I can say is that you've always been so dedicated, a hardworking member of the staff who has always gone above and beyond and has volunteered with numerous extra projects. As a 41-year-old veteran now, who could have rested on your laurels during the pandemic, you still learned how to engage students remotely. She met with her groups consistently until the end of her career. So, Patty, we can't thank you enough for your dedication and service to the students of Strongsville City Schools. Congratulations to you. And I think our last retiree in the audience tonight is Miss Donna Tursky. So Donna has been with the district since 1990, where she began as an aide, and then she started as a clerk in 1997, and then finally began her current role as a data input specialist in 2009. And she's just, I'm going to read here what her colleagues said about her, but I met with her earlier in the year to try to prepare for the transition for all that she does so that we could be ready and know kind of the ins and outs, because I think, as you said, as when you started, it was kind of like, here you go, and she definitely figured it all out. But there's just a lot, and I think we sat for over an hour while you were explaining everything, and my head was spinning and trying to figure all this out. But just the things that you know and you do just because you do them, is we're going to miss that for sure. And expect a lot of phone calls. We may still be reaching out. Oh, yeah. Your colleague said this: Donna has been an invaluable asset to the high school staff for many years now. Her attention to detail has been an asset to the guidance department. Donna makes sure that all the grades are posted, online grades don't slip through the cracks, and that all of their students get their PE waivers. That's another thing she does. Donna is an avid collector of tie products. Her office is populated with beanies and other interesting creatures, and every time you entered her office, there was a new character created or something to observe. Not only was she welcoming when you came to her office, but it was a fun experience. And finally, Donna has been indispensable as a records clerk for Strongsville High School the past 10 years. She's always kind, helpful, always extremely organized and efficient. No binder in the world is big enough to contain all she knows about her job here and all she knows about Power School. She'll be missed by everyone at the high school, but especially by the counselors and the administrators who have depended on her diligence and her expertise. Donna, we wish you the very best in your retirement, and I know that you're going to spend a lot of time doing the job you probably love most, which is helping out with your grandchildren, right? And that one over there is the one you're watching, right? Yeah. Congratulations. And again, I just want to congratulate all of our retirees. I know I mentioned them a few board meetings ago, so I won't go through them again, but just so thankful to have such dedication and experience in our district, and they all will be greatly missed. Thank you.
So on behalf of the board, I just want to congratulate. So on behalf of the board, I just want to congratulate again all our retirees and thank them for their years of service. I'm big on examples, and you've all set a wonderful example for all of us to continue to follow and continue to get better for the students in our district. So thank you very much, and we appreciate it and hope that you have a wonderful retirement. We are going to go a little bit out of order. We need to do an executive session, so we will do that vote, and that'll be a cue for anybody who wants to escape. They can escape, or you're more than welcome to wait. So we have an executive session for the purpose of appointment of an elected official. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Sallee. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Anagnostou.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Sallee, Mr. Micko,
Yes.
Mrs. Housum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell.
Yes.
We will go into executive session at 7:20, and we will return for more business. Thank you. Okay, we are resuming public session at 7:40. Next on our agenda is number 7, approval of minutes. The May 7th, May 21st, June 4th, June 13th Board of Education meeting minutes are on our agenda. All district video and audio recordings will be a permanent part of the minutes. All board-approved minutes are available on our website. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Bissell. Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Sallee,
I have to abstain because I wasn't here during that time.
Mr. Micko,
Yes,
and Mrs. Housum.
Yes.
the motion passes. I now turn it over to George for treasurer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. For my report this evening, I have several items for your consideration. Most of them, well, all of them, dealing with fiscal year end and fiscal year open. So our fiscal year runs from July 1st through June 30th of 2020. So we're closing out the current fiscal year 20, and opening the upcoming fiscal year, July 1, fiscal year 21, and the final appropriation measures and a couple of the items here are for the compliance that need to be sent to the county prior to year end. So the first item is the financial report for month ending May 31st, 2020, which can be found in Exhibit A. Item B and item C are related, but item B is new fund for fiscal year 20. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Strongsville Education Foundation had approved a schoolyard habitat grant at Sarar for I believe for a garden in the amount of $625. This SEF still sent us the check in June, and I talked to the teacher, and she'll implement it next year, conditions permitting. So fiscal year 20, item B is the creation of the grant fund for that account, and item C is the grant approval of accepting the grant. Item D, approval of new funds for fiscal year 21, which can be found in Exhibit B. These are related to the federal grants. Each federal grant has its own fund year, or its own year, so we create a separate fund for that year. So it's the creation of the federal grants for fiscal year 21. Then also each class at the high school has its own student activities count. So it's also creating the student activities count for the upcoming freshman class. Item E, transfer of funds and advances. These are the annual year-end transfers of funds, and then also the advance of funds. The explanations can be found in the Exhibit C, but just for the new board members and the public, the transfers are permanent while the advances will be repaid once the money comes in to cover the deficit. So the purpose of transfers and advances is no funds can end the fiscal year in a negative cash balance. The general fund must cover all negative cash balances. So the transfers that would go into effect to cover those negative balances are the food service, the students' school supplies fund, and the termination benefits fund. The advances, they're mainly for the federal funds. Federal funds are reimbursable funds, meaning that the expenses must occur, and then you ask for the reimbursement. Usually these are done a month in arrears, so the advance is to cover the negative cash resulting from the June expenses, and we'll receive those funds back from the state once we close out the grant, what's called a final expenditure report in September, and we'll probably receive the funds in October. Then either October, November board meeting, I'll have another item on the agenda to approve the return of the advances. So, item F is the student activity programs, uniform school supplies, public school support, internal rotary fund, and local grants proposed budgets for fiscal year 21, which are listed in Exhibit D. Item G is the fiscal year amended permanent appropriations, which can be found in Exhibit E. All the changes related to year end. In order to be compliant with the state auditors for budgetary purposes, they have 3 compliance tests. The first one is, do the approved appropriations by the board match what's in the financial system? Do beginning cash plus estimated revenues appropriations do not exceed beginning cash and estimated revenues. And then a third and final one, which causes the appropriation adjustments at the end of the year, is beginning cash plus actual revenues. Budgets cannot exceed those. So essentially reducing budgets to revenues and beginning cash. Item H, which can be found in Exhibit F, is the fiscal year 21 temporary appropriation. This allows us to begin the fiscal year in July. The temporary appropriation will get us through July and August, and then by September 30th, the board must adopt a final appropriation, which I present in September along with the 5-year forecast, which is, those two are tied together. And then lastly, item I is the food service management contract for Chartwells. This will be so about 5 years ago, we did the bid for food service management company. The bid is good for each year, but each year has a single renewal. So this is the last renewal period for the bid. So after this, if we decide to continue with the food service management company, we would need to go out to bid for fiscal year 22. And this would require a separate vote. Yep.
Food Service Management Company contract, which is out of Fund 006, Food Services. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the contract between Strongsville City Schools and Compass Group USA, Inc., by and through its Chartwells division for the management of the district's food service program be renewed, effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Laura by a hair, second.
Second.
Second by Seth. Any discussion? So I will share with the public that we appreciate all the work that Chef Mike does for us, especially during the COVID pandemic. He has done yeoman's work in helping our students who may need additional assistance, but also the community at large. I think the fresh produce program is an example of that, where we make sure to have as much benefit as we can for our students and our community. So that's great work. We will keep them on their toes, and I'm sure they look forward to the process this year as much as we will. But it is important that we do that 5-year request for proposal process to just make sure we're doing the best we can for our citizens. Any other discussion? Hearing none, take the roll.
Mrs. Housum?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mrs. Sallee?
Yes.
And Mr. Micko?
Yes, motion carries. I do, just real quick, I want to compliment George. You know, this is the busy time for George and his department, but he does everything well. He doesn't shirk his duties. He makes sure every penny is accounted for. And just as an example, I was reading in the news, there's a German company, Wirecard, that just declared bankruptcy. They're missing $2 billion, and they literally don't know where it is. So all of this detail, sometimes we kind of gloss it over, but it's important that we do pay attention to every penny. And I just wanted to say I logged into the My Budget, and I can't wait to have another dose of insomnia because I just want to dig deep into it. So I really liked what I saw.
Thanks.
And I'm sure Sherry will be just as excited. And now it's time for Dr. Ryba's superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. A couple items under my report. The first is an annual item. It's a Calamity Day alternative makeup plan. So this is basically a blizzard bag plan, and we need to approve this for 2 grade levels that does not have as many built-in hours as other grade levels. So this is for preschool and half-day kindergarten. The rest of our grade levels, we have more hours than we can ever use if we have calamity days or even a pandemic, as we learned last spring. But be it resolved upon the recommendation that the Strongsville Board of Education authorizes the Calamity Day Alternative Makeup Plan for the 2020-21 school year as stated in the Exhibit H. We do need to make one addition in Exhibit H under number 3. We need to add the word preschool, so it reads not later than November 1st of the 2020-21 school year, each half-day kindergarten and preschool classroom, and then the paragraph goes on. And this gives us the ability to use blizzard bags for up to 3 days to make up for that missed instruction. The second item is a memorandum of understanding. Just like the board considered and approved a memorandum with the Strongsville Education Association a few meetings back to detail how we would handle some contractual language during the closure due to COVID. This is OPSI, which is our support staff. This is an agreement with for a similar purpose with that group of employees. So be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the memorandum of understanding between the Strongsville Board of Education and the Ohio Association of Public School Employees, Locals 028 and 290, as stated in the exhibit, be accepted, and that exhibit is I. And this one needs a separate vote.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Seth, second by Laura. Any discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Sallee,
Yes.
Mr. Micko.
Yes. Motion passes, and please pass on our thank you to all the leaders and the members for their common sense reasonableness. It's good that we got this done.
I will, thank you, Mr. Micko. And now that we're open to the public again, we actually get to see some of our directors again. So Mr. Breckner, our operations manager, is here this evening with us to share his items for business services. Steve?
Good evening, everyone. The first item in the business services section is support service complex in high school, excavate, grade, and pave sections of the driveway. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the operations manager be authorized to enter into a contract with Vasco Asphalt Company to excavate, grade, and pave the driveway at support service complex and the high school in the amount of $59,965, funding to be from the Permanent Improvement Fund, and that's found in Exhibit J.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Laura, second by Seth. Any discussion? Steve, are we going to make sure the concrete is thicker than it needs to be?
The concrete?
I'm asking, I'm channeling my inner George Grosand.
Well, this is asphalt, but we will be putting that adequate base in there.
Channeling it very well.
All the concrete work that we're going to be doing in combination with this, we're going to be doing in-house, and we will make it thicker than required. The issue is our buses, as they come through the loop road and make a turn, they're actually just pushing the asphalt and creating a wave that's just crumbling. So what we're doing internally with our maintenance crew is creating a concrete barrier, much like we have on the north side of the middle school, that will hold it in place. It will not be a curb, so I don't want to lie to you and say it's a curb, because then it would retain water and that would cause other issues. It's just going to be a concrete strip that holds everything in place so that the asphalt doesn't ripple anymore and then give way, and that's where all the potholes are being caused. The other section is from the salt shed forward towards Pearl. It just was never done, never sealed, and it's beyond repair. We're taking the opportunity with money we have in the Permanent Improvement Fund to take care of that. It's just deteriorating, and that's where our buses park. That's where all of our maintenance trucks are parked. And then also that completes the widening of the Rademacher Road. There where support services used to be, or student services used to be. If you drive by there, you'll see a big mud pit that will be filled in with base, and then asphalt will be put on top of that. That will enable the flow of traffic out of there, not just for football games or sporting events, but just the everyday exodus that happens at that time, to be a left and a right-hand turn lane, so it's not backed up all the way back to the high school into the stadium.
No, that's great, because it'll be safer and quicker and more efficient, and those are all the good things we want, so I appreciate that. Any other questions? Take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Sallee,
Yes.
and Mr. Micko.
Yes, motion carries.
All right, the second item is district insurance. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the operations manager be authorized to purchase property, inland marine, boiler, machinery, crime, automobile, general liability, and umbrella insurance from Liberty Mutual Insurance Company, and that agent is Todd and Associates Incorporated, as endorsed by the Ohio Schools Council at a one-year contract price of $327,368.65 for the period of July 1st, 2020 through July 1st, 2021, which includes all school groups. Last year's cost was $298,741. And then be it further resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education recognizes the following groups as authorized school groups, and they are in the Strongsville City Insurance Policy, and those groups are listed there, and the policy is Exhibit K. All right. The third section is be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the operations manager be authorized to enter into an agreement with Suburban Transportation Company Incorporated for the 2021 school year for the transportation of special education and handicapped students within the Strongsville City School District to in-district schools and also classes at schools out of the district. Transportation to in-district schools will also be provided for students becoming homeless while attending Strongsville City Schools and now residing outside the district. This agreement is put in place due to the impracticality of transporting these students by Strongsville City School Bus Transportation, and that's Exhibit L.
And Steve, before you go on, I just want to make note is that by law, there is a law for students that become homeless, that their last district of permanent residence is responsible for their education, and that's a good law because students then will not be displaced continuously. And a part of that law is we have to transport them for wherever they have have shelter, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a relative, if it's temporary. So we have students that we may pick up from North Royalton. We may have students we pick up from the east side of Cleveland and bring back to Strongsville. So it's a law, it's a good law, but it does require that service of transportation from the district, and we do that by van versus sending a full school bus out to those locations.
All right, the next section are the gifts that were being donated to the district, and I'll read those. Aaron Sullivan Lally donated $100 to be used towards a high school senior student's school fees. Strongsville PTA Council awarded the following grants for the 2019-2020 school year. Chapman Elementary School received a grant to purchase 2 stand-up desks to be used as a webcat, which is a library catalog station valued at $370. Chapman Elementary School received a grant to purchase 6 20 by 20 liquid floor mats to be used in the sensory room, valued at $450. Kinsner Elementary School received a grant to purchase a Boom Whackers 27 tube classroom pack, valued at $186. Muraski Elementary received a grant for a model Mustang Resource Center housed within the Media Center, valued at $273. Muraski Elementary received a grant to purchase social language materials, valued at $180. Muraski Elementary School received a grant to purchase a pickleball, badminton, 6-net system, including rackets, paddles, and all necessary equipment, valued at $1,636. The SEC PTA donated a grant to purchase a Mad Science program, valued at $700. Strongsville Early Learning Preschool received a grant to purchase 6 balance bikes valued at $472. Strongsville Middle School received a grant for flexible seating valued at $224. Strongsville Middle School received a grant to provide yoga in the classroom for all students grades 6 through 8, valued at $1,700. Whitney Elementary School received a grant for the Chardon Polka Band to provide music for their European Art Festival, valued at $800. And individual units of the Strongsville PTA awarded numerous grants to their specific buildings, totaling $12,949.32, as listed in the exhibit, which is Exhibit M.
Steve, before you run away, what is Kinsner Elementary getting?
What did they get?
What are they getting? One more time? I
That
didn't
is
hear it the
a,
first time around.
Okay, all right, hold on.
And we need a full report.
Is that the boom whacker?
The Boom Whacker
I'm not
27.
familiar with
It's not the
27
26
model.
model.
I only go up to the 21 model. I don't
So
know.
either you or Seth can follow up with a student achievement report on a Boom Whacker 27. And then I just as
I
a
know what a
personal,
saxaboom is, but not a boom whacker, so.
and just as a personal note, I'd like to know when the Chardon Polka Band is coming
know.
so that we can make sure to attend that. Do you have a 60-second update on our tennis courts?
Yes, they put the asphalt in earlier, late last week, so we're just letting that cure. You're seeing activity right now that they're gonna be going in and, they striped the handicap parking area or assisted parking, area, by the stadium, which was a directive where, we didn't have adequate parking, in that area, of the stadium for people who needed it to get in and out of the stadium quickly. So that issue's been taken care of. The tennis courts themselves, the fencing will go in. The exterior perimeter fencing was done, but now the interior, those posts will be bored, and that fencing will be done there. Nets will start to be put up. The asphalt will start to be lined and colored. So it's progressing very well. I'm encouraged with the numbers that I'm getting back, but I am not ready in this 60 seconds to tell you exactly what those numbers are until the process is completed, so.
I just have been, when I've been driving by, it's always exciting to see it. You see the drawings, and I'm not very good at visioning what it's going to look like from the drawings, but it's looking great, and I think it'll be great for the community and the high school.
Yep, and I do have to plug the, not only has Vasco been great with the project, but also our interior maintenance crew did all of the sidewalk and the concrete curbing. That was a significant savings, upwards of $16,000 we were able to recoup on the project itself. And when they were going to go asphalt, the gentleman who were running the machines asked who did the concrete curbs, and I said our guys did it. He said they did a great job. So as always, they've proven on these large projects and small projects and everyday projects just how valuable they are. So I have to give them a shout out for that.
So that's high praise indeed, but extend our thanks also.
Okay. Thank you.
Continuing on to the curriculum report, the first item is a textbook adoption for a digital photography class. Be resolved upon my recommendation that a textbook be adopted for digital photography courses as presented in the exhibit. This book has been recommended by professional staff and reviewed by Jen Orlowski, one of the staff members, community members, and yearbook advisor. Additionally, applicable teaching staff have also reviewed the book, and this will be purchased with FY20 funds and can be found in Exhibit N. Number 2, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Strongsville Board of Education enters into a project agreement with Ron Stewart and Associates, LLC, for consultative services for entitlement grant funds for the period of July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021, as found in Exhibit O. Number 3, be it resolved upon the recommendation that a memorandum of understanding between the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio and the Strongsville City School District be approved as presented in Exhibit P. As I talked about in my community conversations yesterday, this is the group that we contract the online learning program for K to 8. So this is, as we talked about, Lincoln Learning and Edgenuity. This is under the Ohio Learning umbrella, which we contract through the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio. So that's to approve that agreement, to enter in that contract. The next one is to actually provide the funds to support that program. So be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Strongsville City School District pays for students to participate in the Ohio Online Learning Program through the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio at an approximate cost of $100,000 for the 2021 school year. Again, this is a cost that is allocated based on student enrollment. So there's a per-student cost. That will be utilized. This gives us the ability to use up to $100,000, but we only spend what we utilize based on student interest and enrollment. And again, as I shared yesterday, if we didn't offer this program, students withdrew from our district to go to a public online charter, $5,020, $6,020, $6,020 of school funds would go with them to this public charter. If they stay with us, we keep that money, and the cost to us is about $4,000 less. So we save that delta if they would go somewhere else. So yes, it is a cost, but we have reduced the expenditures going out because of programs such as this.
And this funding for this year, due to the pandemic, it's an estimate based on number of kids we expect, but also we're using the CARES Act funding to fund this.
So just for everybody, the CARES Act funding, George has talked about in the past, but it's dollars that school districts have received to address the additional costs that we're going to incur because of the pandemic. So the $372,000 that were allocated to Strongsville, George and Aaron and our team has gone through. They've done all the work in the federal grant system to apply for those grants. We've earmarked, Ohio Online, $100,000. This X amount of dollars, so that we're going to use that instead of having to use general fund dollars first. Next,
Cameron, the other thing I'd like to highlight is that it's not strictly a dollars and cents issue. We firmly believe that keeping those students within Strongsville schools is a better option for all of our students.
Absolutely. Number 5 is textbooks for College Credit Plus. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that Strongsville City School District pays for textbooks for students participating in College Credit Plus through Tri-C at an approximate cost of $50,000 for the 2020-21 school year. This is a legal requirement. So the state has said for students attending College Credit Plus, if they file the paperwork at a certain period of time, we have to pay for their credit hour cost, as well as their textbook cost. So this is a required expense. Number 6, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that Strongsville City School District pays to purchase 5 unlimited site licenses to Lexia Reading Core 5 at the cost of $55,000 to be utilized as an elementary reading intervention program for the upcoming school year. This is a program that we've had in place for a few years now. We've seen significant gains in terms of reading at the elementary level. It really hones in and diagnoses specific skill deficits in students and then puts them through both online as well as live instruction with teachers to help enhance their reading. And this is a part of the $1 million literacy grant that Aaron Green got for the district a handful of years ago. This is the last year for the grant, but this will be paid through those grant dollars. And then lastly, under curriculum, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Strongsville City School District pays to purchase My World Interactive Social Studies at the cost of $36,162.47 to be utilized as a content area supplement for English language arts for grades K to 3 for the 2021 school year. Any questions on curriculum? There are no items for this meeting under student services, and so with that, we'll turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent, Jenny Pelko, for the Human Resource Report.
Thank you, Dr. Ryba. Good evening. Under Human Resources, I have the following items for your consideration. Under E1, appointments for certificated staff, appointments for certificated athletic supplemental contracts, appointments for non-certificated athletic supplemental contracts, appointments for certificated supplemental contracts for additional time for our counselors and psychologists and transition coordinator, appointments for certificated supplemental contracts for extended time. This applies for our career tech, teacher, guidance counselors, psychologists, speech pathologist, and transition coordinator. Under E2, changes in hours for non-certificated staff under food services. Under E3, changes in status for non-certificated staff. E4, a stipend for our resident educator coordinator. E5, additional time for certificated staff for the summer of 2020. Under E6, medical leave for non-certificated staff. Under E7, our security services with our partnership with the Strongsville City Police Department that authorizes police officers in our elementary school buildings. E8, Mr. Micko, I need to pull this one from the agenda. This is our service agreement for through PSI with auxiliary services. This needs to be revised, so I'm going to pull E8 from the agenda. And finally, under E9, our service agreement for our Spanish First class through auxiliary services. This is our partnership with St. Joseph and John. And that concludes my report, unless you have any questions for me.
Finally, we have one item for your consideration under technology. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education approves the purchase of Chromebooks, including Google Chrome management license not to exceed $50,000. So this is for two purposes. We are one-to-one in first grade through 12th grade. We have classroom sets of 12 Chromebooks for our kindergarten students. So this will allow us to purchase 180 Chromebooks. A large percentage of those will go to the kindergarten classroom. So as we prepare for in-person, in-building learning, as we prepare for blended learning, as we prepare for fully remote learning, this will allow us to be one-to-one K-8. These are touchscreen devices, so for our youngest learners that may still be working on their dexterity for keyboards, it'll act very much like a tablet. And so that will put us one-to-one K-12. The additional Chromebooks in this will be utilized for teachers that need, in blended or remote learning, the ability to write, specifically our math teachers. A lot of the software doesn't work well, especially as you get to trigonometry and geometry and calculus. So the idea, if I want to have live instruction, I can have a tablet to write on it so students can see me writing on a tablet, and that can be captured and put on a screen versus me trying to type or write on a sheet of paper. So right now, we're slated for a large percentage of these to go to kindergartners, and then we have enough for all of our math teachers and then some extra if needed. And again, just like the other approval for Ohio Online, this comes from the CARES Act grant funding dollars as well, and that can be found in Exhibit S. And if there's no questions, that concludes my report for the month.
Thank you, Kevin. Next on our agenda is number 10, Board Liaison Resignation of remainder of 3-year term. Polaris Career Center, Richard Micko, who needs to resign. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Any other enthusiasm? Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Housum. We do have a... Thank you. We do have a policy with Polaris that board members are not allowed to have family members employed by Polaris, and that has happened in my family. So I have willingly resigned. Polaris is getting the better half, the better 3/4. So in any case, I don't think there's any other discussion. Would you take the roll?
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Housum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Sallee,
Yes.
and Mr. Micko.
Yes. Motion carries. Next, number 11, appointment of liaison to committee for remainder of the 3-year term at Polaris Career Center for 2020, the year 2020, the year 2021, and the year 2022. The meetings are monthly, the second Tuesday of the month at 6:30 p.m., and our liaison is Michelle Bissell. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Sallee. Any discussion?
I have a question. Do I have to abstain?
No, you are allowed to vote for yourself in this instance, yes. Any other discussion? I will just thank everyone. I really do, as many of you know, I really do love Polaris, and I love my time on it. And I'm looking forward to passing that baton off to Michelle and helping her be an effective advocate for Strongsville. Any other discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Sallee?
Yes.
Mr. Micko?
Yes.
Mrs. Housum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations. Number 12 is report on Polaris Career Center. This will be my last report on Polaris Career Center. I do want to give a shout out to a few students. Sarah Eiffel from Fairview High School is one of the Polaris Best of 2020. So we congratulate her. But most importantly, we congratulate Lydia Rabney, who is from Strongsville High School. She was in the Medical Professionals program, and she is one of the best of the best Polaris students for 2020. Lydia earned a 4.0 GPA in Medical Professionals while she was there. She was the outstanding program student as a junior and a senior. She was a 2-year member of the National Technical Honor Society. And this one I think is very impressive. She maintained perfect attendance both years while she was at Polaris, which will serve her well in her college career and her whatever vocation she does after that. But she is going to continue at, she's at the Cuyahoga Community College's Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society. She is active at Grace Church and is a member of the Baldwin Wallace University's Women's Chorus. And one of the things that I think is neat about Polaris is you learn by doing, and it is career tech, and she works currently at Kemper House in Strongsville. So we congratulate her, and we wish her well. She will continue at Tri-C, and then she plans on finishing her Bachelor's of Science at in nursing at Cleveland State University. So we congratulate her. The other announcement is August 5th. It's never too early. Wednesday, August 5th from 5 to 7 p.m. is an adult education open house at Polaris. There's a number of programs, whether it's welding, precision CNC, dental assisting, cosmetology academy, etc. So it's a great time to find out about those programs and see if you're interested. And a few other shout outs. One to Tyler Campbell, who is a class of 2018. He went Strongsville High School, went through the Polaris Criminal Justice program, and he is currently working security, and we congratulate him and thank him for working during the pandemic. He's one of our frontline heroes. So that's my Polaris report. Board liaison and board committee reports. Do we want to just start with Michelle and we'll work our way down?
There's an upcoming economic development meeting, and given the current pandemic, this might be of interest to a lot of people. So they are doing it outside in the commons by the gazebo. Please bring your own lawn chair and maintain proper social distancing guidelines. And Mr. Carbone is requesting that those in attendance come ready with ideas to assist our local businesses. So that will be one of the emphases placed at that meeting. But if you're concerned about the finances of the city in this time, that's a place that you can show up and have your voice heard. So please do come out for that. It is Monday. Well, why does it not say that here?
Monday, June 29th at 7 p.m.
There's no date. It does say 7 p.m. Thank you, Jim. And the other thing of note, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there is current discussion in the city about how do we fill some gaps in our emergency department with the fire department and the EMS. So they are working on trying to negotiate that with the firefighting union about, whether we go with some half-time or part-time employees or continue with our department being made up of all full-time employees. So as of what I've heard is that's still pending. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Do you have any other reports? Laura?
Nothing to report on the Education Foundation. They keep postponing their meetings out. I know they're still talking about jockeys and juleps happening Labor Day weekend, so we'll just stay tuned and find out. As far as PTA, I just want to reiterate the thanks for all the volunteer hours, all the grants, all the money that they give back. I'm fortunate to volunteer at our high school PTA and at our council level, and it's a great group of people to work with, and I just want to thank everybody and all my peers. And that concludes my report.
For me, we do have a policy committee coming up. Our next meeting is July 6th, 2020 at 6 p.m. in the admin offices here. So if you're interested, it is a public meeting, open to the public, so you can join us. And that is it for me. We're going to skip Sherry for now. Do you have any reports?
I do not at this time.
Okay, very good. Next is our consent calendar. Action by the Board of Education and adoption of consent calendar at this point of the agenda means that all items appearing on this agenda with asterisks are adopted by one single motion unless requested otherwise. We are pulling section E8. Are there any other requests?
9.
The MOU had though.
Oh, and we have the audible on changing the language to add the early childhood preschool.
Just add preschool. Just the word preschool.
Just the preschool. We're adding the preschool. We all know preschool is early childhood. So we're going to add that. Any other adjustments to the consent calendar? Any requests? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Housum. Any further discussion? Take the roll.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Sallee,
Yes.
Mr. Micko.
Yes, and the motion carries. 17 is superintendent's timely information. Dr. Ryba.
Thank you again, Mr. Micko. I just wanted to give an update on what we're doing for next school year, right?
In 60 seconds or less.
Just as an update, we've been informed that the governor is going to make his announcement of the finalized safety and health guidelines on Tuesday, June 30th. It has to be Tuesday, June 30th, because that's the last day that he can possibly do it. So, again, this is very important to us because these are the rules. Everything else is guidance. He said publicly in his last press conference that there's been no surprises, which is nothing shocking in what being shared, but facial coverings and so forth. The facial coverings and the social distancing, that's a key aspect of what's going to be talked about. And what you're starting to see is a lot of plans that talk about social distancing of 6 feet being the desired. But people are developing social plans. Most school districts and buildings, if you go down to 4 to 5 feet, we could fit all of our kids back every day. So we will see what comes out on Tuesday, but I think it's important to reiterate whatever is said, if it's restrictions or it's guidelines, we still need to plan in those 3 lanes that we've talked about. We need to plan an in-person in building with restrictions, 5 days a week, all kids. We need to plan in blended learning, which is part-time in-person, part-time remote learning. And we need to plan for 5 days a week of remote learning, as well as the complete online option that we're providing for our families. So we'll have an update as that news breaks next week. Talking about the community conversations, we had one yesterday, and our next one is scheduled for Tuesday, July 7th at 4 p.m. So we would encourage all of our families to tune in at that time. Excuse me. The last thing that I wanted to share is a part of the community conversation, a part of the work we're doing is possibly looking at adjustments to the 2020-21 calendar. So I'm going to put on the screen slides that I shared yesterday, but there is also a state law that says that prior to adopting a calendar, Laura presented a few months ago, or making any adjustments, you have to have a public hearing. So this is our public hearing on the possible adjustments to the calendar. I'll share this out via email on Monday with all of our families. And then we have to wait, the board has to wait 30 days before you can approve a calendar. So what this means is that families will have a chance to provide feedback to me or the board members. And then I believe the first meeting in August is August 6th. And that's where the board will take action on the calendar. So although we're still working through the details based on our District Oversight Committee's directive, the calendar will remain unchanged except for when do we start school. Will we start school as scheduled, which is slated for August 18th, or will we delay it? At latest, students will start August 24th. And what the Oversight Committee has directed us to do is to look at, we want to use that first week for staff professional development, training, parent support, possibly a soft start, a gradual roll-in for students to get used to the changes. So parents can plan. We're not going to start any later than August 24th, but that's what we're going to come back with a specific training plan. Here's how many days we need to train. Here's how we're going to do a gradual start and go from there. And we also shared what's the rationale. It allows more days for training. It allows that gradual start, and it gives us the greatest opportunity to be successful. So I'm sure I went over 60 seconds, but that is my timely information for this month.
I will just piggyback on that, and I brought it with me. Massachusetts released their guidelines today, and if you're in the business, so to speak, every little morsel of information you're hanging on. But what was nice was what I thought reasonable the guidelines were. It talked about in Massachusetts the recommendation is 6 feet, but they recognize that that's difficult for some districts. So the minimum is 3 feet, which I think has a reasonableness to it, and it is also based on science. The WHO has a 3 foot, 1 meter minimum recommendation. Many doctors and scientists, the more distance you have, the better. But at a certain point, we can't have 25 feet and still have more than one child in a classroom. But, I do think that's reasonable, and a lot of things like whether it's masks, whether it's temperature checks, or et cetera, there's guidelines, and it allows the local districts to say, how do we make it safe for our own kids? What I did like was they acknowledged and recognized in their guidelines that we're balancing 2 issues. The one issue is remaining safe during the pandemic. The other issue is that keeping kids away from school continues to have consequences. So it's important that we can follow and work with, whether it's Massachusetts or whatever, to come to that balance for Strongsville, that we need to remain safe during this pandemic, but at the same time, we need to understand that our best option is to get our kids back into school so they can continue their learning. So I know we're all waiting for Tuesday and to digest those, and then we'll act accordingly. Any other comments, questions for Cameron? Next on our agenda is Board of Education Other. We have a discussion item. The item is rescind prohibition of use of district premises. Cameron, do you mind giving us the background?
Sure. A few years ago, we had a community, we had a rental of a community member rented our facilities under the guidelines of under a 501c3 nonprofit company. So if you look at our rental guidelines, there's different delineations of school affiliated groups, nonprofit, and then for-profit. So under the nonprofit heading, it clearly states that you could not charge a gate for events, you cannot make money, you cannot make a profit. This individual and his company had a variety of gyms rented throughout the district. In one of those gyms, they were charging a gate. They were charging for people to attend the tournament. The district found out about that. We held a meeting with the individual. He readily admitted that an employee didn't follow the directive that was given, and paid the necessary fees that were incurred because it had a for-profit. And at that time, based on that violation, the board voted to institute a 1-year ban. And that ban would go on until the individual requested to use our facilities again. So the individual has requested to use our facilities again. The timeline has passed for the 1-year ban. So since the board voted to institute the ban, you have to vote to either keep it in place or to rescind it. So on the July 13th board meeting pending this discussion, there could be an item for vote which would rescind the prior it'll say at this agenda, we're rescinding what you approved there. So the person that has been, we've instituted the ban on, has complied with all of the guidelines of that. And so that was the reason for the ban, and this is part of the process that we outlined as a part of that.
Any questions?
I have a question. Has this ever happened before with other individuals or organizations?
Not during my time as superintendent.
Thank you.
If there's a second violation of that, is there any rules in place or anything as of this time?
There's nothing in board policy that dictates rules as to what would happen. It's a board decision. So not speaking for the board, but as a first offense, they felt a one-year ban was reasonable. After that, in consultation with one of our legal teams, we could talk, but any consequences would then there can be permanent bans, but usually you start off with 1 year and then you expand from there. So that would be the discretion of the board.
So I was on the board when that vote occurred, so I can give a little bit of background, but I don't think we need to discuss the individual per se. It's more the process and the rationale for it. But the rules, the policies that we have in place for rental of our facilities recognize that they're community facilities, that the taxpayer is paying for them. So we give a preferential option to our school kids, to those programs. We then have a tier for, whether it's PTA, Girl Scouts, any of those kinds of programs or organizations that directly affect our students. So we give a tier to that. And then, ultimately they're the taxpayers' assets. And so if anybody wants to use them to rent them, we ultimately have that as a third tier. We felt that the 1 year ban was appropriate. And for myself, I feel that, the person and the company has complied, and I have no reason not to vote to reinstate. So hearing no other discussion, I'd like to see the vote come to rescind come forward on the next agenda, and then we can go forward with that. For my own benefit, I did have Cameron verify with Steve that we're in a place to make sure that this isn't a repeat and that we can manage it well. And I'm certain that the company and the person can use our facilities well, generate income for the district, and have programs for students and their families. So I have no reason not to bring it up for a vote. And then, between now and then, any questions or research directed to Cameron so that we can have a vote at the next agenda. Sherry?
Well, I just had a question. Is there any plans to open the facilities to use for the public?
So that is the bigger discussion is, there's the rescission part, and we'll have that on the agenda, Mr. Micko, but that is actually a recommendation that will be for our district oversight committee on July 2nd. So one of the recommendations is, it's a balance. Our facilities are paid for by our taxpayers. They need to be open, and there's laws that say that our buildings need to be open. In House Bill 164, one of the organizations that I'm a part of as a superintendent actually lobbied to have a temporary allowance for us to not open our buildings. But it's a policy decision too that we can talk about locally. So one of the recommendations that's come from our building levels, our building level work groups, is that we kind of have a phased approach, like everybody else in the world is having a phased approach, that we start off by restricting access to our buildings for outside groups after school hours, simply for the fact is we do not have the staff to clean and disinfect classrooms and high-touch surfaces if we allow evening events, outside groups to occur. So that's the dilemma. It's not like we just want to say, hey, we're going to shut the doors, it's easy for us. It's the fact of, if we need to turn around every night disinfection protocols for all of our buildings and our classrooms and our high-touch surfaces, we can't do that by managing mass amounts of outsiders coming into our building. So the recommendation from the building level is that we put a temporary hiatus on outside groups, but no final decision has been made yet. And if a recommendation does come, then it would be a policy decision to change that policy or alter it for a temporary basis.
It's good we have a policy committee
That's
coming
right.
up.
Yeah.
But, you know, I want to thank Mr. Carbone for being in attendance. But, you know, it's good that we have a good partnership, because the same issues we have to deal with are the same issues the rec center is dealing with, the same issues council committees are dealing with. I hope we can go to Mitchell's and get ice cream during your meeting.
You're buying, absolutely.
We'll discuss that. But again, we want to be smart about it, and we also want to make sure that we're not being on jumping to either end of the spectrum. We're not going to lock down and wait 2 years until a vaccine comes out, but we're also not going to have sand volleyball lots and tons of teenagers in the gym. But we'll work through that. I said we're not. We're going to find a balance. So, any other Board of Education others? So I have one, and that's only because I forgot to talk about it during my report on legislation. But, you know, the Columbus is working hard, and we're waiting for that announcement on Tuesday on what our guidelines are, and then we'll be able to act accordingly. But I was reading Cleveland.com, and there was a letter to the editor that came up in the Strongsville Cleveland.com section. And it was a gentleman from Brecksville talking about how the recent House Bill 164 that was passed, and from Strongsville's perspective, redressed some of the cuts that we received. And in the letter to the editor, he talked about how it was assisting wealthier school districts to the detriment of other school districts. And he took Matt Dolan to task about this and suggested that it may have been a campaign effort on Matt's part. And I just wanted to respond for myself and for the district. We need to thank Matt Dolan for his leadership, and we need to thank him for the work he did. One person's view of House Bill 164 of helping already too rich districts, I reject that idea. It was a $1.6 million cut originally.
Yes, it was a $1.6 million cut,
Originally, it was a $1.6 million cut to our budget,
17% of our state funding.
17% of our state funding, and it was out of balance compared to everyone else in our opinion. And I wanted to thank Senator Dolan for his leadership on that and for doing the yeoman's work to address that. We received how much back? Or we're supposed to receive how
No,
much back?
We did, $623,000.
623,000, which, you know, takes it to, it's still a cut, but it's a more reasonable cut. It's a more manageable cut. And the thing that I always remember is, you know, you don't look at all of this in a vacuum. If you look at it just in a vacuum of our school district, it was a $1.6 million cut, and then 600,000 came back. At the end of the day, the citizens of Strongsville send more money to Columbus than we receive in return, whether it's income tax or property tax or what have you. So as long as we are contributing to Columbus more than we receive, I reject the idea of anything being unfair. And this board and this district will continue to advocate for Strongsville and what's best for Strongsville. So I wanted to publicly thank Mr. Dolan for that. And that concludes both my Board of Education other and report on legislation. Anybody else?
I just had a quick announcement.
Go for it.
To our senior class, 808 Shaved Ice is offering a free shaved ice from now until June 30th. You just show up, you don't have to bring anything, and it's one per student. So thank you to 808 Shaved Ice. You're not a senior.
I want to be a senior citizen. Meeting notification. A regular Board of Education meeting work session will be held Monday, July 13th, 2020 at 7 p.m. in the meeting room of the Administration Building. And word to the wise, the mice will play because someone will be missing. So now's your chance. Now's your chance, Jenny, to make whatever changes you've been wanting to make. I am happy to report that we do not have reason for another executive session. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Housum. Any discussion? Hearing none, take the roll.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mrs. Sallee?
Yes.
Mr. Micko?
Yes, the motion carries. Our next meeting is after July 4th, so I wish everybody a happy Independence Day. Regardless of how we end up celebrating it, please remember Independence Day is an important day for everyone. And we'll see you on July 13th. Have a nice evening.